It was a quiet afternoon at the Riverside Public Market, one of those places where time seemed to slow down. Families wandered between food stalls, tourists snapped photos of colorful shops, and a street musician played soft guitar melodies that blended into the warm air. Nothing about this place suggested that anything unusual was about to happen. Among the crowd walked an older man wearing a simple black jacket and dark sunglasses. He moved slowly, calmly, with his hands resting behind his back. There was no security around him, no entourage, no cameras following his steps. He looked like just another peaceful visitor, enjoying a rare moment of quiet in a busy world. The man stopped at a small vendor's table, admiring a handcrafted wooden piece. The vendor smiled, unaware that history was seconds away from being made. Then, thud, a sudden, forceful bump slammed into the man's shoulder. The impact turned heads nearby. The older man staggered slightly but quickly regained his balance. He turned calmly to see who had hit him. Standing in front of him was a tall, muscular young man, his arms covered in tattoos, his expression full of irritation instead of apology. Two of his friends stood behind him, laughing as if they owned the place. "Watch where you're going, old man," the young man snapped aggressively. The older man didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply gave a small nod and spoke gently. It was an accident, no harm done. But the bully wasn't interested in peace. He stepped closer, invading the man's personal space, his lips curling into a smirk. "You think that's enough? You bumped into me." Nearby shoppers slowed down. Conversations faded. A few people sensed tension and quietly pulled out their phones. "I didn't come here for trouble," the older man said calmly. "Let's both move on." The bully laughed loudly, drawing even more attention. "Move on," he mocked. "Look at you. You're shaking." But the man wasn't shaking. He was completely still. There was something unusual about his calmness, something that didn't fit the situation. Years of discipline were hidden behind that silence, though no one could fully see it yet. The bully mistook that calm for weakness. And that was his first mistake. He shoved the older man lightly in the chest, testing him, challenging him. The crowd began to murmur. Why is he provoking him? Someone's going to get hurt. The older man didn't react. Not yet. And no one in that market had any idea who he truly was or what this single moment was about to set in motion. Because this wasn't just an argument. It was the beginning of a mistake that would change one man's life forever. And what happened next, no one saw coming. The shove wasn't hard, but it was intentional. The older man took a small step back, not out of fear, but simply to keep his balance. He didn't raise his hands. He didn't push back. He didn't even frown. He just stood there, calm and centered, as if the noise and chaos around him didn't exist. That reaction confused people. It confused the crowd, and it confused the bully even more. "What's wrong?" The bully barked, spreading his arms as if performing for an audience. "You got nothing to say now." His friends laughed loudly, feeding off his energy. One of them pulled out his phone and started recording, zooming in on the older man's face. "Look at him," the friend mocked. "He doesn't even know how to respond." But the response never came. Instead, the older man spoke softly, his voice steady and controlled. "I don't want any trouble," he said. "Let's end this here." That calm tone hit the bully like an insult. Most people, when confronted like this, either fight back or beg. Calmness didn't fit the script the bully expected. And when things don't go the way bullies plan, they get angry. "You don't get to decide when this ends," the bully snapped, stepping closer. "You think you can just bump into me and walk away?" The space between them disappeared. The bully's chest was almost touching the older man's jacket. The crowd instinctively backed up, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. Vendors stopped working. A mother pulled her child behind her leg. "Someone should stop this," a woman whispered. The older man looked directly into the bully's eyes. There was no fear there, no challenge either, just calm awareness. "It was an accident," he said again. "Anger won't fix it." That word, anger, set the bully off. "Don't talk to me like you're some kind of teacher," he shouted. "You don't know me." His friends snickered, but their laughter sounded forced now. Even they could feel something was off. The older man slowly shook his head. "I don't need to know you," he said quietly. "I just know where this leads." The crowd murmured. "What does he mean by that?" Why is he so calm? The bully grabbed the front of the man's jacket, pulling him forward slightly. Gasps rippled through the people watching. You see this? The bully shouted, looking around. This guy thinks he's better than everyone? Still, the older man didn't resist. He gently removed the bully's hand from his jacket and let it fall back to his side. I'm asking you one last time, he said, his voice firm but controlled. Walk away. That was the moment. The moment the bully's ego fully took control. He took a step back, laughed loudly, and raised his voice so everyone could hear. Walk away. You hear this guy? He shouted. He's scared. But the crowd wasn't convinced. People were watching closely now, not with excitement, but with concern. Something about the older man's posture, his breathing, the way he carried himself, didn't match fear. A man near the fruit stand whispered, "That's not fear. That's discipline." The bully didn't hear him. Or maybe he did and didn't care. He leaned in again, face inches away from the older man's. You're shaking, old man, he taunted. What are you going to do about it? The older man exhaled slowly, deeply, the way someone does before making a difficult decision. I'm trying to save you from yourself, he said. That sentence drew silence. Not because it was loud, but because it was heavy. The bully frowned, confused for just a second. Save me? He scoffed. From what? The older man didn't answer. He simply stood there, calm and unmoving, while the tension around them tightened like a stretched wire. Phones were recording. People were holding their breath. And the bully, and blinded by pride, was seconds away from making a mistake that could never be undone. Because the next move wouldn't just cross a line, it would erase it completely. The tension in the market had become unbearable. No one was shopping anymore. No one was smiling. Every sound seemed louder, the rustle of bags, the hum of distant traffic, the nervous shifting of feet. The loose circle around the confrontation had tightened. Strangers standing shoulder to shoulder, drawn together by the feeling that something irreversible was about to happen. The bully broke the silence first. What's wrong? He sneered, pacing slowly in front of the older man like a predator sizing up prey. You lose your voice. His friends stood off to the side now, no longer laughing as loudly. One of them kept glancing around, uneasy, while another continued recording, the camera shaking slightly in his hand. The older man remained still. Too still. His hands were relaxed at his sides. His shoulders were loose. His breathing was slow and controlled. It was the kind of calm that didn't come from weakness, but from experience. Still, the bully saw only what he wanted to see. Say something, the bully demanded, stopping inches away. Or are you really that scared? The older man finally spoke. I don't want this to go any further, he said quietly. You're angry, and anger makes people do things they regret. The bully laughed sharply. Regret, he repeated. The only thing I regret is wasting my time on you. He turned to the crowd, spreading his arms. You all seeing this? This guy thinks he can talk down to me? No one responded. The silence didn't support him the way he expected. Instead, it felt judgmental, heavy, uncomfortable. That only made him angrier. He stepped forward and shoved the older man again, harder this time. The impact forced the man back a half step. A few people gasped. Someone muttered, "That's enough." The older man steadied himself, eyes never leaving the bully's face. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not rage, not fear, but disappointment. I warned you, he said softly. This isn't who you want to be. That sentence lit the fuse. Don't talk to me like that, the bully shouted, his voice cracking with fury. You don't know me? You don't get to judge me? He reached out and grabbed the older man by the collar, yanking him forward. A woman screamed, "Hey, let go of him!" Phones shot higher into the air. Dozens of people were recording now, some live, streaming, others frozen in disbelief. The older man calmly reached up and removed the bully's hand from his jacket, slowly, deliberately, without force. The gesture wasn't aggressive. It was controlled. That's enough, he said firmly. Walk away. The bully stared at him. For a split second, doubt flickered across his face. Then pride crushed it. You think you can tell me what to do? He snarled. In front of everyone? He raised his hand. Time slowed. Some people in the crowd saw it coming and turned away. Others covered their mouths. A man near the edge whispered, "No, don't do it," but it was too late. The bully swung his arm and slapped the older man across the face. The sound was sharp, loud, echoing, a crack that seemed to rip through the entire market. Everything stopped. The street musician's guitar fell silent. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the wind seemed to pause. The older man's head turned slightly from the impact. Then, nothing. He didn't stumble. He didn't fall. He didn't raise his hand to his face. He slowly turned his head back and faced the bully. Calm. Unshaken. Unbroken. The bully stepped back, a grin spreading across his face, energized by what he thought was victory. "That's what happens," he announced loudly, pointing at the man. "When you disrespect me." No one cheered. No one laughed. The crowd stared at him in shock. "Did he just do that?" someone whispered. "Why isn't the old man reacting?" The bully waved his hand dismissively. "What? You all thought he was tough?" He leaned in again, mocking. "Now what? You gonna cry?" The older man didn't touch his face. He didn't wipe the spot where the slap had landed. Instead, he took a slow, deep breath. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but it carried. "I tried to give you a way out," he said, "because I didn't want you to suffer the consequences of your own choices." The bully blinked. "Consequences?" he scoffed. "What consequences?" The older man looked at him, truly looked at him, for the first time. "You have no idea," he said calmly, "what you've just started." A chill ran through the crowd. The bully laughed nervously, trying to hide the sudden unease creeping into his chest. "Started what? You're just an old man." But something had changed. The air felt heavier. The silence felt intentional. And somewhere beyond the edge of the market, unseen and unheard, a chain of events had already been set in motion. Because that slap wasn't just an insult. It was a trigger. And what was coming next would make the bully wish he had walked away when he had the chance. The slap echoed in the air long after the sound itself had faded. No one moved. People stood frozen in place, their phones still raised, their faces locked in disbelief. What they had just witnessed didn't feel real. A grown man had just slapped an older stranger in public, and yet the strangest part wasn't the violence. It was the reaction, or rather, the lack of one. The older man stood exactly where he was, his posture unchanged. He didn't clutch his face. He didn't step back. He didn't even blink. If anything, he looked calmer than before, as if the slap had cleared something in his mind instead of provoking anger. The bully expected yelling. He expected fear. He expected retaliation. Instead, he got silence. That silence began to work against him. "What?" The bully snapped, shifting his weight. "You got nothing to say now?" He looked around at the crowd, searching for validation, for laughter, for support. None came. People were staring at him differently now. Not impressed. Not entertained. Just uncomfortable. Some shook their heads slowly. Others lowered their phones slightly, unsure of what they were witnessing anymore. The older man finally lifted his head. His eyes met the bully's, steady, focused, unreadable. "I warned you," he said quietly. The words weren't loud. They weren't dramatic, but they carried weight. The bully scoffed. "Warned me," he said. "About what?" "You." The older man shook his head slowly. "No," he replied. "About you." That answer didn't make sense to the bully, and that bothered him. "What's that supposed to mean?" he snapped. The older man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced around the market. He saw the fear on some faces, the confusion on others. This wasn't about pride anymore. This was about preventing something worse. "I didn't come here for trouble," he said calmly. "I came here to enjoy my day. You chose to turn it into something else." The bully laughed, but the sound was forced. "You're really trying to act wise right now?" he mocked. After getting slapped. The older man's expression didn't change. "Violence doesn't prove strength," he said. "It proves a lack of control." That line hit harder than expected. A murmur moved through the crowd. "That's true. He's right. This is getting uncomfortable." The bully felt it. The shift. The moment slipping away from him. "You think you're better than me?" he shouted, stepping closer again. "You think because you talk calm, you're untouchable." The older man didn't step back this time. He stood his ground. "I think you're angry," he said evenly. "And angry people don't see the damage they're about to cause until it's too late." The bully clenched his jaw. "You keep talking about damage and consequences," he snapped. "What consequences?" "Nothing's happened." The older man looked at him for a long moment. Then he said something that sent a quiet chill through the people closest to them.
Not yet.
That single phrase landed heavily. Not yet. A man near the edge of the crowd frowned. What does he mean by that? The bully's friends shifted uncomfortably. One of them leaned closer and whispered, "Bro, maybe we should go?" The bully shot him an angry look. "Shut up," he snapped. "He's bluffing." But doubt had already crept in. The older man's calm didn't feel fake. It felt practiced, intentional, like someone who had been in far worse situations and knew exactly how these moments ended. "You still have a choice," the older man said. "Walk away now and this ends." The bully laughed again, but it sounded hollow. "Ends how?" he demanded. "You gonna call someone? You gonna cry for help?" The older man didn't respond. He didn't need to. Instead, he looked past the bully, just briefly, toward the far end of the market. A few people followed his gaze. Nothing seemed out of place. And yet, something felt wrong. A woman whispered to her husband, "Why do I feel like something's about to happen?" The bully noticed the shift in attention and snapped back. "Stop looking at him like that!" he shouted at the crowd. As nobody. The older man finally spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "You shouldn't confuse silence with weakness," he said. "And you shouldn't assume someone is alone just because you don't see who's standing with them." The bully frowned. "What are you talking about?" The older man met his eyes. "I'm not the one you should be worried about." That was the moment the laughter stopped completely. The crowd fell silent. The bully felt it too, the sudden weight in his chest, the sense that he had crossed into something he didn't understand. "You're trying to scare me," he said, but his voice lacked confidence. "I'm trying to stop you," the older man replied. "Before this becomes something you can't undo." The bully looked around one more time. His friends wouldn't meet his eyes. The crowd wasn't on his side. And the calm man in front of him looked less like a victim and more like someone who had already seen the ending. Somewhere in the distance, faint but unmistakable, the sound of engines began to grow. "Low, steady." Approaching, the older man didn't react, but his warning had already been given. And the next part of this story would no longer be under the bully's control. The market was no longer just a place of casual shopping and soft music. It had become something else entirely, a stage for tension, curiosity, and fear. Every pair of eyes was locked on the older man who had just been slapped, the one who had not even flinched. The bully was still smirking, or at least pretending to. His chest puffed out, his friends were trying to regain confidence, and his hand hovered near the older man's jacket, ready to shove again if needed. But something was different now. He could feel it. The energy in the air had shifted, and he didn't like it. People began whispering among themselves. "Wait a second, doesn't he look familiar?" A teenage girl whispered to her friend near the smoothie stand. "Familiar?" "How?" her friend asked. "I swear my dad watches his movies. That stance, the way he stands, it's like Steven Seagal," she said, eyes widening. At first, it seemed impossible. Could this just be a coincidence? Some older man who happened to look like a Hollywood star. But the more the crowd looked, the more details matched. The sunglasses, the black jacket, the calm confidence that radiated from every movement. A man wearing a veteran's cap stepped closer, narrowing his eyes. He squinted, observing the older man intently. "I know that face," he muttered. "I'd recognize him anywhere, that's Steven Seagal." Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. "Steven Seagal? The action movie guy? No way, he's right here? That guy just got slapped by a bully." The bully noticed the shift in attention. Phones were no longer filming him with admiration. Instead, cameras were capturing a different story, a story where he had overstepped, where the odds were no longer in his favor. He tried to regain control, waving his hands. "Stop staring," he barked at the crowd. "Does anyone see this old man as special? He's just some washed-up celebrity." But the crowd had already seen enough. They were analyzing the posture, the breathing, the calm aura. This wasn't just any older man. Something about him commanded respect. People whispered to each other, trying to piece together what they were witnessing. One of the bully's friends leaned in, voice trembling. "Bro, I think we messed up." That's Steven Seagal." The bully froze for a split second, his smirk faltering. "No way," he scoffed. "Steven Seagal? The guy from the movies?" The friend nodded, panic in his eyes. Look at how calm he is, this is not normal. The bully laughed nervously, trying to cover his sudden doubt. Yeah, right, that's him.
Sure.
But doubt had already started eating at him. He could feel the crowd's energy turning against him. Their whispers, the subtle shaking of heads, the way people were starting to inch back, it all pointed to one truth: he had underestimated the man in front of him. Then, the older man spoke, his voice calm, low, deliberate. Names don't matter, he said. Actions do. The words hit the crowd harder than the slap itself. Murmurs grew louder. People exchanged glances. Some nodded silently, recognizing the truth behind the words. This man wasn't here to boast. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to stand firm. And the bully had misjudged him completely. What are you talking about? The bully shouted, trying to regain dominance.
I don't care if you're some movie star.
But the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted. He could feel the energy of the crowd shift subtly, palpably. Every eye on him was now measuring his next move, judging his arrogance. Even his friends were too intimidated to laugh. A woman near a fruit stall whispered to her son, "This man, he's in control. Look at how he stands. He's not afraid." Another teen muttered, "Man, this guy isn't just calm, he's untouchable." The bully tried to force his grin, but it came out strained. His bravado, the energy that had fueled him until now, was fading. He looked around, noticing the whispers, the subtle nods of recognition, the way people were starting to lean in, anticipating something he didn't understand. "You think everyone here is scared of you?" the older man said softly, addressing him directly, though his voice carried to the crowd. "You've made one mistake underestimating who I am. Your next mistake would be underestimating what's coming." The words made the bully pause. His jaw tightened. Sweat appeared on his brow, unacknowledged until now. He had no idea what the older man meant, but instinctively, he knew it was serious. And then, just faintly in the distance, a new sound began to grow. A low, rhythmic rumble, engines approaching faster and faster, punctuating the tension. The bully glanced toward the edge of the market. His friends noticed it too and froze. The older man didn't flinch. He didn't need to. Somewhere beyond the crowd, unseen, someone was coming. Someone with authority, someone whose presence alone would make even the bravest bully hesitate. The bully's smirk faltered completely. Doubt replaced arrogance. Panic replaced bravado. The older man's eyes didn't waver. He gave no further warning. He simply stood calm, deliberate, commanding attention without a single aggressive motion. The market was silent except for the faint, approaching engines. Every whisper, every phone camera, every heartbeat seemed to synchronize, anticipating the revelation that was about to unfold. The bully still didn't know who he had just slapped. But soon, he willed, and the crowd, finally realizing the stakes, leaned forward as if drawn by some invisible force. Everyone felt it, the calm before the storm, the moment that would change everything. The low rumble of engines grew louder, unmistakable now. It wasn't traffic. It wasn't a delivery truck. It was something different, something precise, calculated, and fast. The bully glanced toward the street at the edge of the market. His friends stiffened beside him, finally realizing that whatever was approaching wasn't just random. The older man, however, remained perfectly still, almost as if he had expected it all along. "Coming to save you, old man?" The bully sneered, trying to mask his rising panic. "You think someone's going to run out and fight for you?" The older man didn't reply. He didn't need to. A black SUV turned onto Riverside Street, moving quickly, lights hidden, tinted windows concealing the passengers inside. Two more SUVs followed. The bully's smirk faltered. His chest no longer felt puffed with confidence. Something was happening that he didn't understand, something that far exceeded his imagination. The SUV screeched to a halt at the market entrance. The doors flew open simultaneously, and out poured heavily armed federal agents. Tactical, trained, coordinated. Their movements were fluid, purposeful. Not a single unnecessary motion. Their eyes were fixed on the older man, not on the bully. The crowd gasped. Phones were raised higher, recording every second. Mothers pulled children closer. Teenagers whispered among themselves. This wasn't an action movie anymore. This was real life. One agent, taller and sharper than the others, moved forward, eyes scanning the area quickly before locking onto the older man. "Mr. Seagal, are you safe?" he called, authoritative but calm. The bully froze. His jaw slackened. The smug grin disappeared entirely. He glanced at his friends, fear etched across their faces now. "Safe," one of them whispered. "They're their agents." The older man finally spoke, a calm nod to the lead agent. "I'm fine," he said softly. "Not hurt." The lead agent's eyes narrowed, scanning the market perimeter. Then he looked at the man beside him, gesturing subtly. A quiet order passed through their earpieces. This was a coordinated response, not a coincidence. The bully's knees shook. His bravado collapsed under the weight of realization. The man he had slapped was not just a movie star, and the people now surrounding him weren't here for theatrics. They were professionals, experts, protectors. A second SUV door opened, and the world seemed to pause. Out stepped a man in his mid-40s, sharp suit under a tactical vest, badge gleaming against his chest. Authority emanated from every movement, every step. He walked straight to the older man, his presence commanding, eyes cold and measured. The crowd whispered in unison, "Fat, that's his son? No way, the Homeland Security chief." The older man placed a hand gently on his son's arm. "I'm fine," he said, soft but firm. The son's jaw clenched, his gaze sweeping over the bully and the now frozen friends. "You," he said, voice low and controlled, pointing directly at the man who had struck his father. "Step forward." The bully stuttered, terror flooding his voice. I didn't know, I swear I didn't." The chief cut him off with a look. Silence fell, not a whisper, not a breath, just an undeniable presence. "You didn't need to know who he was," the chief said calmly. "You needed to be decent." The words hit harder than any slap. The bully swallowed, tears forming as the reality of his mistake crushed him. He had underestimated a man he thought was just another old stranger. Worse, he had triggered the attention of someone far beyond his comprehension. The crowd gasped, phones captured every moment, live streams exploded online, comments flooded in, and, "Bully picks wrong target. Steven Seagal didn't even fight back. Homeland Security chief storms in." The older man, Steven Seagal, remained calm. No anger, no revenge, just controlled disappointment. "Humiliation is punishment enough," he said softly to his son, who nodded, understanding the lesson. The bully finally dropped to his knees, trembling, eyes filling with tears. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know, I swear." Steven lifted a hand gently, not to strike, not to scold, but to convey the power of restraint. "Respect should not depend on identity," he said quietly. The crowd murmured in awe. The lesson was clear. Power wasn't in fists, guns, or authority alone, it was in discipline, patience, and control. The chief stepped aside, allowing his father to step forward. The bully, broken and humbled, nodded repeatedly, muttering apologies. The agents relaxed, and the tension easing as the threat dissolved. The market exhaled as one. Phones lowered. Shoppers slowly resumed their day. But the lesson lingered, etched into every mind present. Respect is earned, but it is also recognized even without knowing a person's name. Steven Seagal simply turned, walked quietly back into the crowd, disappearing as naturally as he had arrived. No cameras. No fanfare. Just a man who taught the world that real power lies in restraint, and that underestimating someone can have consequences far beyond imagination. And the bully would never forget it. The market was quiet now, but the tension lingered in the air like a fading storm. People whispered to each other, recounting what had just happened, replaying the moment the bully had slapped Steven Seagal and the sudden arrival of federal agents. Every phone captured it all. Every live stream exploded across social media, and yet the most powerful moment had nothing to do with chaos. Steven Seagal stood calmly near a vendor's table, examining a small wooden carving. His son, the Homeland Security chief, remained close but allowed his father space. Together, they were a portrait of control, discipline, and quiet authority. The bully remained in the middle of the market, knees still slightly bent, hands trembling. He hadn't moved since the agents and Steven's son had intervened. The reality of what he had done, and what he had provoked, was settling in. This wasn't just embarrassment. It wasn't just a slap on the face. He had disrespected a man who had the calmness and the connections to make his life unrecognizable in seconds. Finally, He gathered enough courage to approach Steven. Step by step, slowly, carefully, his voice shook. "Mr. Seagal, I came to apologize." Steven looked up, his expression unreadable but not unkind. No anger. No vengeance. Just calm acknowledgement. "You've learned your lesson?" he said softly. "That is worth more than punishment." The bully's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know who you were. I didn't know your son." Steven shook his head gently. "That's not the point. Respect should not depend on identity." Watching the interaction. Phones recorded the moment, but it wasn't the slap or the agents that captured attention. It was the exchange of forgiveness, the power in restraint, the lesson in patience. The bully bowed his head. I am sorry, sir. I will never forget this." Steven extended his hand. The gesture was simple, calm, but carried immense weight. The bully, overwhelmed, took it. A handshake, a symbol of humility, learning, and a chance to begin anew. The crowd murmured appreciatively. Some whispered, "That's how real strength looks." Others nodded quietly, clearly affected by what they had just witnessed. A few younger onlookers exchanged glances, clearly taking mental notes about respect, discipline, and the consequences of anger. The Chief of Homeland Security stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on his father's shoulder. "You handled that perfectly, Dad," he said quietly. "Exactly the way it should be." Steven nodded. Sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones you never fight. Sometimes, the greatest victory is restraint. As the market slowly returned to normal, the bully lingered for a moment, staring at the older man. His arrogance was gone. What remained was humility, awe, and the resolve to do better. He didn't need the cameras, the agents, or the crowd to know that this was a lesson that would follow him forever. The media had already begun reporting the incident. Clips of the slap, the calmness, the agents, and the son's arrival spread across platforms. Headlines blared. Bully slaps Steven Seagal, instant karma ensues. Homeland Security chief intervenes after public incident. Respect over identity, the lesson we all needed. Steven walked quietly through the market, disappearing into the crowd just as naturally as he had arrived. No fanfare. No dramatic gestures. Just a man who had reminded the world that real power lies not in aggression, but in control, patience, and the courage to teach without hurting. The bully watched him go, hands still shaking, heart still racing. But one thing was clear: he had been given a second chance, a rare one, and he would carry the lesson forever. In that moment, the market returned to normal. Families resumed shopping. Vendors returned to their tables. Street musicians strummed softly once more. And though the day continued as usual, the memory of what had unfolded lingered. A living lesson for anyone who thought arrogance could ever replace respect. The final moral echoed quietly through the crowd, through the phones, through the countless online viewers. Strength is not measured by fists or fear. True power is restraint, discipline, and the courage to give a second chance. Respect should be given to all, not just to the powerful. And with that, the Riverside public market returned to its peaceful rhythm, but the story and the lesson would never be forgotten.